carbs are not the devil, despite what you've heard. So today I'm gonna give you 7 tips on how you can use carbs effectively. So tip number 1 is, what are carbs for? So carbs or carbohydrates are essentially a macronutrient along with protein and fat. So these are nutrients that your body needs to do certain functions. So carbohydrates are going to be used for energy. They're going to be used in certain enzyme functions. You're going to take a piece of the carbohydrate and put it on an enzyme. You're going to use it to make certain proteins as well. And you're going to use some of that to store for energy for later. Tip number 2, when is a good time to have carbohydrates? So it turns out there are better times to have carbs than others. If we review all the literature, all the studies that have been done, knowing how the body works, there are a couple of times that are going to work better for you as far as metabolizing the carbohydrates and storing them effectively and not as fat. Your body is going to be more sensitive in the morning for carbohydrates as far as the way your insulin is going to act. That means it's more likely to be stored as energy and not fat. A great time to have carbohydrates is after resistance training, meaning weight training. So if you've done a workout with weights, that's another great time to have carbohydrates. Tip number 3 is, what type of carbohydrates will work well for you? Well, there's 2 types of carbohydrates. One I would call fast acting, the other slow acting. Has to do with how fast you absorb it. So in general, we want to use slow acting carbs. Reason being is it's going to have less effect on your insulin level. So what happens is when you have sugar going to your bloodstream, your insulin level is going to go up. When your insulin level goes up, it's going to say store that sugar as fat because your body sees plenty of energy. So what we want to do is eat carbohydrates that are going to absorb slowly so we don't get as much of the insulin spike. So the type of carbohydrates that are going to absorb slowly are complex. So that would be things like oatmeal, not instant oatmeal, regular oatmeal, quinoa, chia seed, brown rice. Those are type of carbohydrates that your body will absorb slowly. So keep that in mind when you're looking at carbohydrates. Tip number 4, so I get this asked often, is what about fruit? Is it not a carbohydrate? They say I should have 9 servings or 7 servings or 6 servings of fruits and vegetables. Fruits are important, and so you do want to keep in mind a couple of things. One is like, what's the nutrients? And then again, is this something that's going to affect my blood sugar a lot or little? So it turns out berries are very good at having a lot of nutrients, has polyphenols, which are good for as an antioxidant source and for feeding your gut, and they don't affect your blood sugar as much. So strawberries, blueberries, raspberry, blackberries, those are all great sources of fruit. I would try to avoid other fruits like bananas, mangoes, really high in sugar and on the lower side as far as the nutrient intake. Tip number 5, how much carbs should you be consuming? Well, depends. So if you are trying to lose weight, actually would not look at your carbs first. I would actually look at your fat and protein first, and particularly starting with protein. You want to make sure that you have an adequate amount of protein so you're actually not losing muscle as you lose weight. So in general, somewhere between 0.5 gram to 1 gram per pound of body weight is going to be enough to sustain your muscle mass. After that, we can work backwards and figure out the fat amount, and then whatever is left for your calories, that can be carbs. So let's say, take me for instance, I'm 200 pounds. I would say somewhere between 100 and 200 grams of protein would be sufficient for me. Let's say 2,000 calorie need, I would want to decrease that by at least 10%. Some people would go 15%. So that would put me at 1,750. So I would take that protein number, that's so many calories, 600. That leaves me with 1150. Sorry for all the math, but I just want you to understand what we're doing here. 30% of my calories is gonna come from fat, which would be another 600-ish. So now we're at 500. So carbs are about 4 calories per gram. So I divide that 4 into the 500 that's left, and that's about 125 grams. So for me, I would want to have around 125 grams carbs, mostly complex carbs. Tip number 6 is for fiber. People often forget that fiber is a carbohydrate, and you definitely want to have fiber in your diet for multiple reasons, including feeling full after eating, for your colon health, for your gut health. So you want to incorporate foods that are going to have a lot of fiber in it, and this is going to be beans are a big one. Carnivorous vegetables like cauliflower, broccoli, spinach, those types of vegetables are going to have a good amount of fiber in it. If you need a supplement, that's fine too, as long as we get the fiber in. Somewhere around 20 to 30 grams would be a good start. And this is really gonna help you feel overall healthier. Tip number 7 is to avoid the worst carbs. And so if you've been watching and paying attention, you're gonna get the idea it's gonna be something that's really high calorie and doesn't have any nutrients in it or fiber. So the big one is going to be desserts. So cheesecake is probably going to be at the top of the list. It's really high calorie. I don't know if you've been to Cheesecake Factory before, but you can get 2,000 calories in one slice and not really get any fiber or nutrients out of it. Other things are going to be like pizza, really high in calories, dense, and not a lot of fiber. I would also add donuts, cake. Those things are really not without nutrients, and so not to say you can never have them, but those types of food regularly are going to destroy your weight loss.